Hello 3D printing friends, this is the AnkerMake M5C 3D printer. It's supposed to be a cost-effective and beginner-friendly 3D printer. But is it really? Let's find out. I'm Brian and you are watching BV3D. Hi, welcome back. Okay, so today we're going to be taking a look at the AnkerMake M5C 3D printer. Thanks to AnkerMake for sending this to the channel so I could show it to you. This is the latest printer from AnkerMake and it's got some interesting specs and an interesting, possibly questionable, design choice. And we'll cover that and AnkerMake software applications and go over what it's like to use the printer and take a look at some of the things that I printed so you can get an idea of what the print quality is like. First, let's talk about the M5's specs and features. Its build volume is 220 millimeters on the X-axis, 220 millimeters on the Y-axis, and 250 millimeters on the Z-axis. The bed has a removable spring steel sheet with a textured PEI coating for easy print removal, and the bed can reach 100 degrees Celsius. It has a direct drive extruder with an all-metal hot end that can reach 300 degrees Celsius. It has dual parts cooling blowers and an automatic mesh bed leveling system that uses the nozzle to probe the bed in a 7x7 grid. It has silent stepper motor drivers and dual Z-axis stepper motors. It has up to 500 millimeters per second print speed. The printer also comes with a nice toolkit. There's a big poster with the assembly guide on one side and the quick start guide on the other. Now these walk you through the process of unboxing and assembly, which is really pretty easy, as well as the initial setup with the mobile app. And its big feature is one button operation in the form of, well, this one big button. So what's it like using the AnkerMake M5C? Well, remember that questionable design choice I mentioned earlier? It's this one feature that most other printers have that this one doesn't. And that's a screen to control the printer from the printer itself. AnkerMake's other printer, the M5, has a touchscreen built into the right side of the X-axis arm, and it's pretty nice. But the M5C? Nada. So how do you control a printer that only has a big play-pause button? Well, you use an app on your iOS or Android device. Now don't worry, we'll get to that big button in a few minutes. So you download the AnkerMake app from your device's app store and then either sign in with your AnkerMake account or create a new one. Then use the app to scan the QR code on the back of the printer to set it up. Once it's scanned, pick your Wi-Fi network and enter the password, and that information is transferred to the printer so it can get on your network. Then the printer is added to your AnkerMake account. Now once that's done, you can change the name of the printer if you want. If there's an available firmware update for the printer, you should probably apply that as well. Next step, generate a topographical map of the bed. In other words, tap the auto level button in the app. This will heat the nozzle and the bed and then probe a 7x7 grid. The app shows you what it's doing and estimates how much time is left in the process. After about 10 minutes, it's done. Then you can load some filament. Tap the nozzle temperature to adjust it, and I set it to 200 degrees Celsius. Since I'm also planning to print a model, I'll tap the bed temperature and set that to 60 degrees Celsius. Once the nozzle is at temperature, push the filament into the tube at the top of the spool holder until it stops. Then hold in the loading lever on the tool head and push it in a bit more. I've found that it helps to press the release ring on top of the tool head and disconnect the guide tube to get the filament down into the extruder and then put the tube back into place. Now at first I thought the tube didn't really bring a lot to the party because it feels like it's in the way when you're loading filament. But after thinking about it, I believe the reason it's here is because this printer's fast, and AnkerMake didn't want it to yank on the filament when the tool head moves really fast on the X-axis. Okay, well now that the filament is loaded, let's print a model using the app. At the time of recording, there were 40 models available in the app's model catalog. Tap the Explore button and find a model you want to print. I decided on the big-eared cat model. The app will show you the amount of filament needed in grams and about how long it'll take to print. When you're ready, tap the Print button. Then the app transfers the pre-sliced file to the printer and it starts printing. So that was actually pretty easy. The app has every control you would expect to see on a printer that has a screen. You can set or adjust the nozzle and bed temperature, you can adjust the Z offset if needed, you can load and unload filament, and you can home or move the X, Y, and Z axes to your heart's content. Now remember I said we'd talk about that big play pause button? One more thing the app lets you do is configure what happens when you press that button. There are 3 different ways to trigger an action with the button. You can make it do something when you press it once, you can make it do something when you double press it, and you can make it do something when you press and hold it for about 3 seconds. The standard way they're set is a single press will print the most recently added G-code file on a USB Type-C flash drive that's plugged into the printer. A double press will reprint the last file printed, and a long press will start the mesh bed leveling process. Now there's one other action you can assign, and that's homing the X, Y, and Z axes. So there are 4 possible actions and 3 possible triggers. So the button could be useful if, for example, you were printing things for sale and you always printed the same model on this printer. Walk up to the printer, press play, and come back later to get the part off the printer. Then press play again, lather, rinse, repeat. Your own little print-on-demand machine. Now, what do you do if you want to print more than the 40 models available in the app's model catalog? For that, you'll turn to the AnkerMake slicer software and your favorite 3D printing model repository site. Download a model from your favorite site, open the STL file in the AnkerMake slicer, and adjust settings as you see fit. You can set the printer type, and that'll need to be an AnkerMake M5C. You can set the nozzle diameter. The printer comes stock with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, but you can also get 0.2 millimeter nozzles from AnkerMake. You can set the filament type. AnkerMake sent me some of their PLA Plus, so that's what I have set here. Then you can choose from Easy Mode or Expert Mode. If you are a Cura user, you'll notice that AnkerMake's slicer looks awfully darn familiar. Expert Mode will give you access to the myriad settings and controls you're used to adjusting. But for the models I sliced and printed, I used Easy Mode. Next, you can choose between fast, normal, and precision printing styles. Hovering over the little eye icon will give you a quick overview of what each style offers. Each one has a standard layer height associated with it, but you can adjust this and the infill percentage as well. And you can turn on supports if the model you're printing needs them. Then you can slice the model and export the resulting G-code to a USB flash drive or send it to the printer over the network. If you choose to send the print job over the network, the slicer will switch to the Device tab, and from there you can monitor the progress of the print job. Now there are a couple of minor issues that I've noticed with the slicer, however. For one, it lacks keyboard shortcuts for, well, pretty much everything. And it doesn't have a command to clear the build plate, reset the settings, and start a new project. Other slicers have this, including Cura. Another issue I have with it is these intrusive connection issue dialog boxes, which will pop up over anything else you're doing with the computer. The last little problem is that when you quit the app, it always thinks you have unsaved changes, even if you just opened the app or you just saved a project. But despite those little annoyances, it does a good job at slicing. So now let's take a look at some of the things that I printed on the M5C. The first thing I printed was the big-eared cat from the AnkerMake mobile app's model catalog. The models available in the app catalog are pre-sliced, and this one was labeled as having been sliced in fast mode for PLA. So I used AnkerMake's yellow PLA Plus filament. It's one of the spools that AnkerMake sent with the printer. Printing the cat was as simple as selecting the model, tapping print, and picking the printer. It only took about 30 minutes to finish, which was pretty quick, and the result isn't bad at all. The printer did a good job on overhangs, and there isn't really any stringing apart from a few little wisps here and there. So I think this pre-sliced model turned out great. The next model is the print-in-place roller box by designer Clockspring. It's a storage box that prints all at once with an already in place rollback lid. I sliced this with AnkerMake Slicer's Easy Mode and Normal Speed setting. I printed it in Polymaker's Polyterra Charcoal Black PLA. The lid mechanism works perfectly, sliding back and staying open as expected. The sides have little dimples built into them, and the printer did an okay job on printing them. There's some fairly regular ringing artifacts on them, but the rest of the model came out really good. Now these are great on your desk for keeping paper clips or small flash drives handy and stuff like that. Here's a cable winder that I found on Printables by designer Squin. This also has a couple of print-in-place mechanical features, like the hinge and the spinny part. On this one, the first layer was squished a little bit much, so the spinny part was slightly fused to the rest of the base, and I needed to carefully go around the circumference of it with a hobby knife to set it free. But I think the model came out pretty good, and it printed in just under 2 hours. Plus, it'll help me keep my USB cables tidied up. Now, here's a part I designed in Tinkercad to keep this rather thick cable loom in place. This was also sliced in easy mode at normal speed, and it only took about 25 minutes to print in the Polyterra Charcoal Black. It came out pretty good, and the spot for zip ties worked like I expected. It's got a little bit of ringing, but that doesn't impede the function of the part, and now I can keep my desk's power cable out of trouble. This is a model of Neuschwanstein Castle in Germany. Like almost everything else I printed, it's sliced in easy mode and normal speed. This was about 11.5 or 12 hours worth of printing. The end result is a very detailed print, though it does have some ringing if you look closely. There are lots of little trees on the rocks at the bottom and lots of little crenellations. Those are the notches along the walls and the roof at the entrance here. There is some weirdness to this model, though. There are gaps between the rocks and the walls in several places, and the rocky face at the back of the castle looks really odd. It's as if some of the geometry is missing. But those parts of the model look weird in the slicer too, so I think the problem is the model and how the slicer interprets it rather than the printer itself. Now there's a little bit of stringing between some of the spires, but it's not bad. And with all these little notchy parts along the roof lines and everything, those are going to be very heavy on the retraction and de-retraction moves. Some printers have trouble with that sort of thing, but the M5C did really well with it. You can even see inside the top of this tower, which is cool. Next up, I have a Benchy Navy. The 3D Benchy was designed by Creative Tools. These were sliced and printed in different ways. Like the big-eared cat, this one was printed from the AnkerMake mobile app, which proudly proclaims it's a 17-minute, 40-second print. 2 minutes were spent heating the nozzle in the bed, and then about 3 minutes to probe the bed, and then printing began. And at about 18 minutes from that point, the Benchy was done. Now forgive the black smudges on this one. I switched from the black filament to the yellow again, and apparently I didn't completely purge it all out. This Benchy is, well, it's not perfect, but it only took 18 minutes. There are significant ringing artifacts on the hull all the way around. There are gaps between the walls of the box behind the wheelhouse, and the overhangs on the bow are a bit less than smooth. Also, the smokestack is a bit lumpy and uneven looking. But you can tell it's a Benchy, and it did finish, and again, it only took 18 minutes. Now, I suspect this Benchy is probably sliced with every possible shortcut that can be taken when printing a Benchy, and those shortcuts may or may not apply to other models. So, even when using the AnkerMake slicer and the fast settings, the best Benchy time I got was about 30 minutes, and that's this one here. The quality on the 30-minute Benchy is improved compared to the 18-minute Benchy. The gaps in the walls on the box are gone, and the overhangs on the bow are smoother. And the smokestack looks clean. But the ringing artifacts persist, and there's a pretty significant vertical ripple on the port side near the stern. I wanted to compare the fast settings to the normal settings, and when sliced for normal, the Benchy takes about 48 minutes to complete. There are some really widely spaced ringing artifacts around the port side bow, but the odd vertical ripple near the stern is gone. Apart from the ringing, this is actually a pretty good Benchy. Anker also sent me a 10-pack of 0.2mm nozzles to try out, so I removed the stock 0.4mm nozzle and put on a 0.2. Then I told the slicer I had a 0.2mm nozzle on the printer, and I sliced the Benchy with the precision settings. This resulted in 0.1mm layer heights, and the Benchy took just over an hour and a half to print. It came out really smooth thanks to the thin layers, and really sharp thanks to the tiny nozzle. Look at the window and door frames on the wheelhouse. Those are really crisp. The only thing to complain about on this Benchy is that the ringing is still present, and the arches on the doors and the round window at the back each seem to have a single loop of filament drooping down. But everything else about it seems great. Hey, remember when I printed the castle in an AnkerMake 3D printer video? Those were good times. Anyway, I got to thinking, what's a castle without a dragon? So here's Aria the Dragon by Loom 3D. This was also printed with a 0.2mm nozzle in precision mode, and it took about 2.5 hours. But remember, precision mode is 0.1mm layer height, and this is a tiny nozzle. There are a couple of places where an overhang didn't work out as expected, and I ended up with a little splinter or two of filament sticking out of the model. But there's no stringing, and with this being a smooth, organic shape, you don't really see ringing on it. Finally, right? Now this is Aria at 100% scale, and she's a bit large compared to the castle. So to get an idea of what it might look like in a more appropriate size, I scaled her down to 50% and sliced and printed again in precision mode with a 0.2mm nozzle. This gives the same level of detail as you'd get printing Aria at 100% scale with a 0.4mm nozzle, except that she's smaller. And maybe it's because she's so small, but I don't see any flaws at all on this print. Plus, she makes for an awesome statue in the castle's courtyard. Okay, that's about it for the prints. Now let's go over what I like about the M5C and what I don't like, starting with the things that I like. The printer is easy to assemble. Just bolt the gantry to the base and plug in a couple of cables. And setup, that is adding the printer to your AnkerMake account in the mobile app, is also a simple process. Using the AnkerMake mobile app, it's easy to control the printer, and the controls are nicely laid out. It prints fast. It can make a rough Benchy in about 18 minutes, or a pretty nice one in 30 to 45 minutes, or a high-resolution one in about an hour and a half. The AnkerMake slicer gives good results, and it has convenience features like being able to send a print job over the internet or monitor the progress of a job. Now, here are the things that I don't like. While the AnkerMake slicer works pretty well, it lacks keyboard shortcuts for common operations. With the printer itself, I've noticed a lot of ringing artifacts on the prints, like a lot. In fact, most of the things that I printed ring more than my ears after a Weird Al concert. But I think the biggest dislike for me is that the printer has no screen. Not even a simple monochrome LCD with a basic user interface and a few buttons for menu selections. The printer can be made to print without the mobile app, but basic controls, such as moving the nozzle or the bed, adjusting temperatures, loading or unloading filament, all require the use of the app. So local control of the printer amounts to push button receive print, or push button stop printer because something's going wrong. Now, having said all that, here are a few things I think AnkerMake can do to improve the experience of using the M5C. AnkerMake, this part of the video is specifically for you. First, please do something about the ringing on the prints. If the printer's firmware supports input shaping, please include accelerometers on the X and Y axes and add a calibration step in the mobile app that will use those sensors to help get rid of the ringing. Second, maybe include a small USB Type-C flash drive with the printer and maybe also a Type-A adapter for people who only want to use the printer offline. Third, please add keyboard shortcuts to the AnkerMake slicer. And fourth, please make it so the slicer doesn't throw dialog boxes over the top of whatever else I'm doing on the computer when the slicer is sitting in the background. And finally, please add some basic logic to the slicer so it only asks to save unsaved changes if there actually are unsaved changes. Okay, let's wrap things up. For you offliners who don't want printers connected to your network, you're limited to the push button receive print functionality, which prints the most recently added file on a flash drive. And when used offline, AnkerMake's slicer only allows you to slice a model and save a G-code file. Without the printer on a network and without the mobile app, you won't have the ability to make temperature adjustments mid-print, or move the X, Y, or Z axis when the printer is idle, or load and unload filament, or anything like that. The only thing you can do with that button is start a print, or once a print starts, stop it. I guess technically you could also level a bed with a long press, but the point is the lack of a screen with a user interface on the printer itself means that for those who prefer to keep their printers completely offline, this printer is going to be a hard sell. That said, I think the usability of the printer is somewhere between pretty good and excellent with the combination of the AnkerMake slicer and the mobile app. Particularly the mobile app, since it basically takes the place of having a screen on the printer. So for those who are used to controlling everything with their phone, this is probably a good match. AnkerMake claims the printer is cost-effective and beginner-friendly. Is it? Well, it retails for about $400. Taking into account the M5C's speed, ease of setup, and the relative ease of use with the mobile app, I'd say it's a fair claim. The bed leveling on the M5C just works, and for new 3D printer owners, that's half the battle right there. Plus, the slicer, apart from my gripes about it, does simplify the whole slicing and printing process in a way that I think beginners can comprehend. Easy mode is actually easy. And as a new user's understanding of 3D printing grows, they can expand into using expert mode to dig into advanced settings if they want to. I think the two biggest drawbacks for me personally are the lack of local control with the screen and the ringing artifacts on the prints. Though I think if AnkerMake can at least get the ringing under control, I could probably forgive having to use my phone to operate it. Then again, phones and ringing kind of go together, right? Right? That was a joke. Okay, so that's the AnkerMake M5C 3D printer. Thanks again to AnkerMake for sending this over free of charge so I could show it to you. And big thanks to everyone who supports the channel, whether with channel memberships or by using the links in the description. If you liked this one, give it a thumbs up and maybe consider subscribing so you don't miss future episodes. Well, 3D printing friends, that's about all the time we have for this one, and now that we're at the end, let's go print something cool.